So I'm going to talk about the little bit of time that you have with your patients and what are some of the hot button important issues that you should be concerned about, or I know that pediatricians probably more than any other medical specialists have the responsibility to address nutrition as well as all the medical issues that you deal with. So it's hard. I know how hard it is to fit in an appointment and get everything that you need into that appointment. So hopefully I'll give you some insight into what, as a nutritionist, what I think are some of the more important things and the flag signs that would hopefully help you identify individuals who may be at risk for some nutritional concerns. Nothing financial to disclose. So this is just sort of my checklist, and I'm going to go over all of these. But the diet, whether it's a picky eater or a problem eater, do they take supplements? Are there meals happening at home with families? Do they eat breakfast? What's the sweets, the snacks, the beverages especially? And then activity and screen time as a snapshot. So to me, it's really important that we address nutrition because I'm sure you've heard it before. It's not the first time that this next generation is not going to live as long as their parents. And the reason for that is because by age 12, many kids are already starting to have evidence of cardiovascular disease. 1 in 3 kids are obese. 1 in 3 kids will develop diabetes over the course of their lifetime. 80% of overweight 10-year-olds are very likely, studies support that they're very likely to continue the obesity trend. More than 25% of kids take prescription drugs, and your organization allows statins as young as 8. So we're in for a real problem unless we can make some changes, and nutrition's at the core of it. Nutrition and health go hand in hand in physical activities, so you can empower parents to really do a good job about nutrition. If we have to identify what the problem is, I would say that our kids are overfed and they're undernourished. So we have an obesity problem. They eat lots of calories, but they don't eat the right kinds of calories. They're eating way too much empty calorie foods and beverages. Beverages are really a problem. Sweetened beverages are. Obviously, you use growth charts to track it, and you can track the obesity, but yet you can have kids of normal weight that are still undernourished. They might not be gaining weight, but they might not have all the nutrients that they need. They're woefully short in meeting most of the recommended food groups, but especially fruits and vegetables. They just don't get enough of them. And fruits and vegetables are really the powerhouses of good nutrition. I mean, not alone dairy, whole grains, lean meat, legumes, nuts, there's all kinds of other nutrients, but if we can get kids to eat fruits and vegetables, they tend to be the ones that have the healthier diets. So it seems to be a foundation that will help. This is from the dietary guidelines to kind of show you, and I know it's a tough slide to see. Do I have a pointer? I do. So here's the goal, and here's whole grains, vegetables, fruits, dairy, seafood, oils, fiber, potassium, vitamin D, calcium, woefully short in meeting goals. And this is everyone. This is age 2 through adult. But where we get plenty, I don't know if you know this term, SOFAs. It was one of their terms from the dietary guidelines. It stands for sugars and solid fats and added sugars. So basically from cakes and cookies and extra kinds of foods, way more than we should be consuming, along with the refined grains, sodium, and saturated fat. So the American diet, it's a pretty sad diet, and we're not doing a good job, and we're certainly not doing a good enough job getting kids to eat healthier. These are the top sources of calories, age 2 and over. So again, a whole collective. So grain-based desserts is number 1. That's cakes, cookies, pies, those kinds of things. Yeast breads, chicken. But number 4, the soda, the energy drink, and the sports drinks, a lot of calories coming from there. And things like pizza, which, are obviously pizza is a healthy food. It's not bad for you. I think in this category where we need to pay attention to are the sweets and the beverages. And then when it comes to your age groups from 2 to 18, the top source is grain desserts. Number 2 is pizza, not so bad, but 3 is soda. And soda and sugar-sweetened beverages the estimated calories per day, 118 for soda, and soda's empty calories. There's no nutritional goodness that comes from sodas. And yet we drink a lot of them. I mean, I'm thrilled to see all the soda giants are saying that they're going to make a difference. We'll see what happens. They do sell diet soda. I don't think we want to advocate that our kids just start drinking lots of diet soda either. But it's estimated that nearly 40% of the calories in this age group come from empty calories. So that's the extra calories without the nutritional goodness, without the nutrient rich. It's far exceeding what we call discretionary calories. That was used in the dietary guidelines. It's about 100 to 200 calories a day, depending on how active and the age group that you're in. But that's the extras. After you eat all of the nutritional good food, that's what you have to play with. But we're not satisfying that. And I thought this was interesting to show you, again, from the dietary guidelines, but partly because to show you that category of soda, how big it is in terms of where the added sugars. And added sugars mean everything from sucrose, table sugar, high fructose corn syrup, things that almost any sugars that are added to foods, not the natural occurring sugars in fruits and vegetables and in dairy, but in the added. And then I also think it's worth pointing out here, ready-to-eat cereals get bashed all the time, and they're not necessarily terrific foods, but they're what we call a vehicle food. So if you're eating cereal and it's made from a whole grain and you're putting a low-fat dairy on it and you're putting some fruit on it, is the sugar really that bad if it's helping you to consume it? So, but just to put it in perspective, it's not a huge amount that kids are getting from cereals. It only ranked, 3.8% of the added sugar in their diets are coming from cereals. But because there are other nutrients in that, it's far better than those calories. Okay, good nutrition. I hope I'm preaching to the choir, about the importance of it. I mean, it's not just about growth and development, but we also know about cognition and ability to think and perform and have energy, and it's so essential to everything that kids do that we really have to help them have healthier diets. And when it's presented right, at our conference we had Hugh Atchison, so you probably know who that is. He's a local chef that's from Athens. He was talking about what he feeds his kids and how his kids love vegetables. Well, when your dad's a chef, it makes sense that maybe they would, but I think it just points out that kids maybe don't eat vegetables when they're overcooked or out of a can or cold or not prepared properly, that parents really have to do a job at that presentation, at that exposure, because multiple exposures are required before they really adapt to it. But, busy parents don't have a lot of time, so it's difficult. But we really can do a better job if we can get parents to take ownership to helping make food fun, interesting, and get kids to eat it. And it's a balancing act. There's so many issues involved. We don't just eat to fill the tank to meet our nutritional needs. You eat for so many reasons, and kids have a lot. Their taste buds are much more acute than ours are. They have a lot of individual preferences. There's family, cultural, time, cost, money, so many issues to deal with when dealing with nutrition. But the diet, taking a look at their diets is really one of the most powerful things that you can do, to just a quick look at what they're eating. Food diaries are a great thing to ask your patients to bring into you. Just write down for a day or 2 days or how even one day that's typical. Ask for a typical day what the child is eating for the parent to write it down or bring it to you on their phone so that you can take a look at are there any glaring nutrients? And if there are food groups that are missing, that's a red flag, because you cannot get the nutrients from vegetables in other food groups. They're just not there in abundance. And of course, supplements work, and of course, nutritional gaps can be filled with supplements. But supplements are meant to fill in gaps, not to replace good nutrition, not to replace the food. And food has phytochemicals and fiber and things that we've yet to discover. So food is so much better than taking a pill. I mean, pills are there, supplements are there to supplement, not to replace. What you should be looking in the diet assessment for is variety. A lot of kids get stuck. They get stuck on foods and they don't eat more than, corn and peas or potatoes and corn, and that's the extent of the vegetables. And even though there's nutritional goodness in those foods, the variety and the color that's in the nutrients are reflected in the color, so that red vegetables and red fruits tend to have similar nutrient profiles. Dark leafy greens do, white vegetables do. So if you can get them to have a wide variety of colors, or at least more than one colors, you're going to be assured of more nutrients. The sources of the beverages, that's critically important. How do they stay hydrated? Do they ever drink water? Kids don't drink enough water. They like sweetened beverages, and how many kids live on juice. And when they live on juice and they want nothing but juice, they don't eat other food because they'd rather drink their calories. It's easier. How's the appetite? Are they hungry for meals? Any kind of restrictions and allergies. Bowel habits are a good indicator that they're getting enough fiber and getting enough fluid. But just kind of looking, are there any strange behaviors? Any strange behaviors that are flag signs that there could be some nutritional issues going on? These are the food groups to encourage. Using MyPlate, I think MyPlate is really one of the best icons that we've ever had for nutrition because it just makes it simple. And this should be for breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks. Use this icon to help parents figure out what they should be eating. Vegetables at breakfast, sure. At snacks, sure. I mean, you can figure out ways to get them in, but the plate is a great model to help get kids to eat those foods. And these are the nutrients of concern identified in the guidelines this year, but they've been identified for years because none of us get enough fiber, calcium, vitamin D, or potassium. Now, fiber you get from fruits and vegetables, legumes, nuts. Those are probably the best sources. Calcium's a little harder to get. You got to have dairy to get the calcium. Dairy is the best source of calcium in the diet. Yes, dark leafy greens and broccoli, but you'd have to eat a ton of them. So that's why dairy is so important. And dairy also helps satisfy the vitamin D and the potassium. So good milk drinkers, good dairy consumers don't have these issues. But if you don't drink milk, these issues become more difficult. Vitamin D is hard. You can't rely on the sun. Or you shouldn't rely on the sun. And potassium, fruits and vegetables are the primary source of potassium. Good news is that potatoes that kids love, one medium potato has about the same amount of potassium as a banana. So it's a good source. But parents, they need to help create these healthy habits, offer the healthy foods, serve as role models. Sometimes getting kids involved, you see what Michelle Obama has done, the things like the gardens. When you plant it and then you dig it up and you touch food and you play with food, you become more familiar and interested in it. So any way to engage kids in food, from taking them to the grocery store to helping them do age-appropriate things in the kitchen, helps form a better relationship with real food. But, parents, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. You can serve them the food. The parent's responsibility is to serve the food, but the kid has to decide what they're willing to eat and what they're willing to try. Because, you set up battles and turf wars if you go beyond these golden rules. When I had my children, and I dare say, my mother and generations before her, we relied on Dr. Spock. There was one tome, one Bible to learn everything you needed to know about raising kids. Today, if you haven't walked down a bookstore aisle, they don't have too many bookstores these days, the Amazon aisle for all things about, the health and nutrition of your children, it's overwhelming how many choices there are. So parents are confused. The scholarship on nutrition is insane. And then there's the bloggers, and mommy bloggers are winning the race in terms of, we battle them in terms of offering good nutrition advice. I mean, they have more followers than people who have credentials do. So it's really a challenge to compete with all of the information that's out there, and a lot of it is misinformation, and it's not valid. So parents are confused, and they need your guidance. They play a pivotal role, obviously, but what's really interesting is that parents are in control up to about age 6. they can pretty much control what the kids eat because they feed them. They're not eating out at kids' friends' house. They don't have the influence of school. So that is so fundamental to the kinds of dietary habits that they form for the rest of their life. By age 6, they're pretty much developed, and yet the parents really can influence that in a fabulous way. Toddler to kindergarten age group is probably the best one because when they're babies, they stick their tongue out and they take what they want. But it's really important that moms don't talk about, oh, I'm so fat and I can't eat that and that's fattening, and create these types of food relationships that their daughters often mimic. I mean, we see it in eating disorders all the time, that it's the mom that created this initial discussion. So to be positive about food, offer healthy food, be that role model that eats the healthy food. The parents, you can't say, I don't eat vegetables, but you have to eat them. So they really need to play a strong role in terms of modeling. And it all starts in the kitchen. What do you bring into the house? Parents have to bring in those healthy foods. If you don't have those apples to snack on, and you don't have those carrot sticks and grape tomatoes and things that kids will eat, they're not going to eat them. It starts in the kitchen. You got to load up that kitchen with nutritious and delicious foods and make it easy. Make it easy for them to grab, because sometimes a whole apple seems daunting, but if it's cut up, it's easier. In the front of the refrigerator where kids can get this food easily, it should be there so that it's more accessible. So making good food, having it in your kitchen, making it accessible really can help. And then moms and dads, we want them to cook more at home. Because when you cook at home, you're in charge of those ingredients, you're in charge of those portion sizes, how much you feed to the kids. Restaurant portions are out of control. They're really large, and we tend to overfeed. And look at kids' meals. I mean, it's better. It's definitely gotten better than it was several years ago. The National Restaurant Association's done a good job at trying to get kids' meals to be better. But in general, you're pretty much assured you're going to find fried food and French fries and chicken fingers and, not necessarily things that help kids promote healthier habits. And moms and dads have a tendency to push a lot of food on kids, have them eat more. I'm sure you're familiar with studies that have shown that, parents don't connect that maybe they do have overweight children. And overweight parents think overweight kids are normal and encourage the kind of eating behavior that they engage in. So we want to make sure that kids are not being served adult-sized portions. And one of the guidelines that we use is a tablespoon for every year of life is kind of a guideline for parents to use. So when it comes to the protein source, the vegetable source, if you use a tablespoon per year of life for each of the foods on the plate, it'll give you a good guideline of roughly how much to feed the kid. It also concerns me that we see that parents often use food to soothe children. So how do we create bad habits when we grow up? If, every time you're in a bad mood or you're depressed, you want ice cream because that's what mom gave you when you were a child. Food is love, and so it's often used as that expression of, let me make you feel better. So that poses some challenges when we push food when kids are cranky or irritable or didn't get an A on the test. Snacks are really important, but what we want snacks to do is contribute to the nutritional goodness of the diet. So we like to think about snacks as mini meals, not meal wreckers. If they're drinking apple juice and eating chips, that's a meal wrecker. We want to have snacks be important contributors to the diet so that it has vitamins and minerals and fiber, and think about those food groups to encourage and those nutrients of concern. Kids need snacks. They can't get everything they need in 3 meals. So those mini meals are really essential to helping them get all the nutrients that they need. And here's where we really have to keep an eye on the juice and those calorie-laden beverages. That's where they can interrupt, maybe make them not hungry for the next meal or not eating some of the more nutritious foods that they should be having at snacks. So here's just a whole list of different kinds of healthy snacks, and all these slides are on the website. so the links so you can go back and look at them if you like. But, making it easy, making it accessible is really what we want to encourage parents to do. Like snipping grapes, so that you can grab a bundle of them, that kids don't have to fiddle with breaking them in half. Dips. Oftentimes dips are what help kids want to eat some vegetables. They're more likely to eat some broccoli if there's a little dip that it goes into. Maybe that's what it takes to get them to eat an apple. Well, to me, that's okay. I'll give them that dip, a low-fat dip or a little caramel dip, because I think of it as a vehicle food. It's helping them eat the more nutritious food. So if it's cheese sauce that needs to go on the broccoli to get them to eat broccoli, well, you're a step ahead because they're eating broccoli and maybe they weren't before. Frozen fruit pops, kebabs. Kids love kebabs, little pieces that are put on a stick that can help make them. Popcorn. Popcorn's a whole grain. Helps satisfy, half your grain should be whole grain. So kids love popcorn. The low-fat microwave is perfect portion control. Hummus, crackers, cheese, all kinds of good things for snacks. And when it comes to sweets, kids are born with sweet tooth. I remember all those early studies back from Sam Foman at Iowa. They did all those little faces that looked at kids infants when they got bitter and sweet and salty. You're born with a sweet tooth, so we need to allow them to have sweets, but better to have sweets that are nutrient rich. So chocolate milk is at the top of my list because, you're getting kids to have a source of calcium, potassium, and vitamin D. Yeah, it has a little chocolate in it, but it might satisfy their sweet tooth. It's also a great recovery beverage for sports, and kids love it. I talked about the pre-sweetened cereal. And maybe use the cereal as a topper. Sprinkle the, maybe the base has to be just plain old cornflakes, but then put that sweet stuff on top of it as a topper. Yogurt, fruit juices, 100% fruit juices, smoothies. And smoothies is a great way to get kids to get vegetables in. So juices and smoothies that you add some kale. That's like the queen of greens. It's super nutritious. But when there's an apple in there, it sweetens it up a little, and all of a sudden they're getting vegetables and helping to meet their recommended needs. Look at that beautiful, these pops that you can make that are made out of fruit. What kid wouldn't love those? Chocolate dipped strawberries. They're getting strawberries. You have a little chocolate, it's okay. So I think we need to just try to let kids have sweets, figure out a way to find foods that they love that are sweets. When you freeze fruit, like frozen grapes, they become a whole different, fruit, and they're fun, and kids love them. So playing with them, grilled pineapples, amazing and delicious. So try to find that sweet balance and get the sweet tooth to be satisfied with things that are also good for you. The beverages, there's so many calories that are consumed in the beverages that it's really important that we not let it displace those nutrients. So if they're drinking soda and juice drinks like, Hawaiian punch type drinks and not drinking milk, it's a problem. Beverages don't reduce how much you eat, and they can displace a lot of nutrients. There was an interesting study that gave kids jelly beans and liquid beverages and jelly beans to see whether or not the consumption of liquid calories and solid calories, they were both pretty much empty calories, how does that impact your hunger level? When you eat solids, you become more full than when you drink liquids. So liquids don't necessarily satisfy you, and in this study, they ate more when they had the liquids than when they ate the jelly beans. So it's an important piece to remember that, liquids are for quenching thirst for the most part. Common problems, we talked about that. Too much juice, too much soda, anything other than formula and milk in a bottle. When you see soda in bottles, it just, I'm sure it galls you to see that kind of thing that, they're giving babies in bottles sodas. We need, even though 100% fruit juice is good, the American Academy of Pediatrics has wonderful guidelines. We've got to make sure parents adhere to those guidelines, and there's a good reason. And if you want more, eat the whole fruit, because the whole fruit gives you fiber. You get the fiber, it slows down the absorption, you get the chew factor, it doesn't impact the blood sugar levels as quickly and as rapidly. Low and non-fat dairy, obviously excellent beverages, but so is water. We need to get kids to drink more water. Think of sweetened drinks as those extra calories. A 12-ounce can of soda has 150 calories and 10 teaspoons of sugar. It's a lot. We don't need our kids, they don't need to be consuming that. So how about picky eaters? And how do you identify picky versus problem eaters? Most kids are picky. Research shows that, from birth to 8, about 20% of all kids are going to be picky eaters and have some food issues. They have food jags. That's pretty common, where they only want to eat certain things. And during those food jags, they're not going to go through the rest of their life just eating peanut butter and jelly or pizza. That's when, you just keep trying, encourage parents to just keep trying and give them that once daily multivitamin and hope that they expand. Keep it simple, simple foods, not with a lot of casseroles and mixtures. Kids tend to like simple and nutrient-rich, simple foods are really what's going to help you move the needle, hopefully. We talked about getting them, getting kids involved. That helps picky eaters. The more they can touch, and it's okay to touch and play with food just like toddlers do in order to help them become more familiar. And then offer the most nutritious foods at the beginning of the meal. So trying that offering early on while they're hungry helps edge your bet and helps moms get kids to eat more of the stuff that they're looking for. So the red flags are when kids eat fewer than 10 foods. Now this is not just for a food jag, but in general, that if they only have 10 foods that they like, and this is a consistent pattern, that's a concern. It's a problem eater, not a picky eater. When they seriously struggle to try new foods, when they have real problems and mental breakdowns when new foods are introduced, when they have strong dislike of messy hands and faces and touching foods, gagging on certain textures, that when certain textures are introduced, they really have an exaggerated gag reflex. Preference for the squish and swallow kinds of foods that they don't really have to eat, that they just kind of swallow very easily. Another flag sign. Unable to keep food or liquid in the mouth, that there's hypersensitivity in the mouth. You see a lot of these with sensory processing disorders and with autism kids, but there are plenty of normal kids out there with sensory processing disorders that really have some problems with the foods that they eat. Extreme fussiness at meal times. And one point to make about these kinds of real problem eaters is that the weight is not necessarily reflective of the problem. So don't think a normal weight child couldn't possibly have these problems, because they very well could. Underweight, overweight, or obese. The nutritional deficiencies can be throughout the spectrum. It doesn't really have to impact their weight. And children between the years of 8 and 12 who are problematic can have eating disorders. Even though it sounds young, and we tend to see it more in high school, a little bit older, there's documentation that kids this young can have eating disorders. So really have to be aware of what some of these flag signs are and how to identify whether you're just picky normal or whether there's a problem that requires some other intervention. Another important issue to address is breakfast. There's so many studies that show that breakfast really is one of the most important meals, and it sets, they've been fasting all night. Breakfast comes from break fast, so it's breaking the fast. They needed to think, they needed to perform in school, and the studies have shown consistently that kids who do eat breakfast do much better in cognition-wise. So it's an important piece. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. Cereal works just fine. Smoothies work fine. You don't have to sit down and spend a lot of time, but breakfast is a really important meal. And the studies also show that kids who eat breakfast get have better nutrition, have diets that include more of the nutrients that are missing, have healthier body weights. So breakfast seems to be tied with more nutritious diets overall and healthier body weights. So it's an important piece to get them to do early in life and to continue throughout. Television screen time, interesting study that came out of Cornell just this past month. It identified not only screen time, but the nature of what kids are watching really triggers some eating behaviors. And I think what's happened, we have sensory overload, and so things are really fast. So what they found is that kids that had watched programs and commercials that were really fast-paced, the ones that are designed for kids, ate more. Ate twice as much as kids who had more Geritol kinds of commercials to look at. So the fast pace, the things that kids like, really trigger that need to eat and eating more. And it just promotes mindless eating, especially if they're sitting there with the bag of cookies and, by their sides. So obviously, amount of screen time is important. And so is mealtime. Studies support the fact that kids who sit down and eat with their families do better, have healthier diets, healthier weights, don't do drugs, do better in school, and it's that connection with the family. It's that you're making eye contact, you're having conversation, you're interacting with your kids. The parents have their finger on the pulse. It's also nice if you could turn off all the television, remove the phones, no phones, no smartphones, nothing like that. And I think it will help parents if they try to create this nice mealtime environment so that they can understand what makes my kid eat more. What are some of the triggers? Having foods, the second helpings on the table, is bad for kids who can't control their appetite, so you want to leave them off the table. Positive communication, the dinner table is not a time for arguments. It's a time to have nice, engaging conversation and sit down, not eating in the car, not eating on the run. And most families can't do this often, but if you could just encourage them to do it as often as you can. And if it's only once a week, well, it's once a week. It's better than not having it happen at all. More time would be better, and it doesn't have to be at home, and it doesn't have to be dinner. It could be any meal where you're sitting around the table and talking and enjoying it. And there was an interesting study that looked at the dynamics at the table, and that when you eat meals together, there's no doubt that it's beneficial. But what you eat and who you eat with also are important factors that they found in this study. That children who eat regular meals with their families, they have all these wonderful benefits. And then when there's conversation is really not positive, it really impacts how much they eat and the value of the family meal. So you can undo the family meal, the benefits of the family meal, by arguments, by yelling at your kids, by not treating the meal as a safe haven for which positive conversation happens. And interestingly enough, all it needs is 20 minutes. You don't need to spend more than 20 minutes at mealtime in order to get these benefits. So encouraging your patients, the families, to sit down and have family meals, I think really can go the distance. And pretty much, it's one step at a time. And kids, if they start out on the right track, they really have great there's so much going for them in terms of not becoming obese, not getting those chronic diseases, maybe living longer than their parents, and really enjoying a full and productive life. Nutrition is critical, and it doesn't have to be perfect. If 80% of the time you do the right thing, if 80% of the time you try to, make the right decisions, nobody's perfect, and you don't want your parents to feel like they have to have perfection. But minimizing that added sugar, especially in the sweetened beverages, sitting down as a family, trying to work more of those food groups to encourage and gather as a family, physical activity, things that you do together, bike ride, swim, hike, whatever. Forget about restrictive diets. They don't work. It's not what to do to children who are overweight. That's another whole lecture. But making sure you have a house full of healthy foods and good options is really a much better choice. and helping kids find the fun in fitness. That fitness is not a chore. It's not something that they hate, but that they'll grow up enjoying that being outside and having fun and playing tennis or swimming or bike riding, or whatever it is, that it's looked at as fun, not as something I have to do. So in less than a minute, you have to talk about all of this, which is impossible, I realize. But just to kind of give you from my perspective, from a nutrition perspective, what are the key things to try to help get parents on track to be, great role models and great caretakers to help these kids get every chance they can to grow up and be healthy. So with that, thank you very much. Do we want to take we have time for a few questions?
Yes, please.
Okay.
So thank you very much.
Thank you.